Human milk is meant for human infant. It's not meant for anyone else. It's so species specific, and we owe it to our littlest, most vulnerable citizens to give them the very best. And it's human milk. And in Brazil, the mother doesn't have enough milk. She just walks out the door with a couple bottles of donor milk, and she just can go and get it anytime she needs it. We need to do that as well. However we can help these people get it without incurring the cost of paying for it themselves.
Balloons, bazookas, boobies, bosoms, boulders, cans, hooters, knockers, melons, honkers, jugs, rack, tatas, tits, torpedoes, guns, bust, doorknobs, coconuts, and our favorite one, the girls. Welcome to the All About Breastfeeding show, where your host, Lori, highlights mothers just like yourself and goes beyond the surface questions and digs deep so they share not only their joys and happiness in their daily breastfeeding life, but also their pain and struggles and how they worked through them.
Episode number 117. Welcome to All About Breastfeeding, the place where the girls hang out. I am your host, Lori Jill Eisenstadt, IBCLC, which stands for International Board Certified Lactation Consultant. There is not much more time for you to get in on the 4th Trimester Summit. How can you possibly turn away from 40 speakers who are coming to you virtually so you never even have to leave your home? And they're talking to you about issues about postpartum. There are topics that you never even knew you would want to know more about until you became a parent. There are 3 tracks of information, and one of them is connect and nurture your baby. We have this intense motherly instinct to take care of our baby, but many times instincts is not quite enough. You want the very best for your baby, and thankfully, our baby experts on the summit know what to do. They will share how to encourage healthy and optimal physical, emotional, and mental development for your little one. Just go to allaboutbreastfeeding.biz and you will find a link that will gain you access to the summit. A quick note before we head into today's show. There are 2 stories in particular that have been posted in our community Facebook group. One is an article I reposted from Mothering Magazine, and it is on the topic of sex and co-sleeping. And the other is a story of a mom and her uplifting journey of adopting a baby girl and her pathway to breastfeeding her daughter. And this was posted by Vanessa, a member of our group. Thanks, Vanessa. You can read these stories and talk about them to other mothers in the group. All you need to do to join the group is go to Facebook, search for the 4 words, All About Breastfeeding Community, and click the join button, and we will see you there. I am so glad you are back with us to listen to part 2 of Julie's story. In part 1, she shared with us her personal journey into breastfeeding her first daughter and into inducing lactation with her second daughter, whom she adopted. If you missed part 1, you absolutely must go back and listen to episode number 114, as Julie tells us her heartfelt story of why it was so important to her to breastfeed her second daughter and how she went about accomplishing this. We ended part 1 on what I thought was a bit of a downer with the story about how the hospital staff threw away some precious donated milk. That's okay, as most stories, they usually have some drama to them. However, all is forgotten because in part 2, we pick up with Julie giving us detailed information about the benefits of donated milk and how it saves thousands of lives each year. I think my favorite part of this interview is hearing Julie tell us how she and a small but mighty group of passionate providers worked tirelessly to successfully open up the New York Milk Bank. Have you ever wondered what motorcycles and milk have in common? Didn't think you did. But now, I hope I have you wondering. Well, you gotta listen to the show to find out. You are in for a treat. So, let's get started. Can you talk to us about why the huge desire to be able to offer donor milk to our smallest preemie sick babies?
These babies are being saved at very young ages now. We can save an infant at 23 weeks gestation, and they have a very, very immature digestive system. And because their mothers have not gone through the 40 weeks gestation that will prepare their mammary glands for milk production, many of the women don't make milk. What we've had to do until donor milk was here, give them another animal's milk. I mean, formula is not being made in the factory with some formula. It is coming from cow's milk. And cow's milk is great for calves. It grows them very rapidly from 65 pounds to 400 pounds as rapidly as possible. And every milk from every mammal is different. It's species specific. Human milk was meant to double the brain size in the first year of life. And it is filled with all the components that can do this. The oligosaccharides that are the fats that help the baby's brain to grow, all the enzymes necessary, the growth hormones. There's growth hormones for all the different systems in the body. And the colostrum itself is like a pre-milk that kind of prepares the gut for milk coming later in the 3rd to the 5th day. And if a woman gives birth at 23 weeks, her milk is different than if a woman gives birth at 26 weeks. And that milk is different than if a woman gives birth at 32 weeks, and the same for 40 weeks. The milk changes. It's almost as if Mother Nature knows what this baby needs at this point in the gestation period. Human milk is species specific. It doesn't introduce an antigen, which would be something that might cause a reaction to the baby. And we've learned that when we give them formula, we are introducing a foreign body that wasn't meant for this baby to have, a foreign antigen. And the rate of this disease called necrotizing enterocolitis increases. And just think of that word for a minute. Necro means death, and entero means intestine, and itis means infection. These babies can come down with this infection that literally causes the gut to slough off and die. And then they need a bowel resection.
And why are they more likely to succumb to NEC than a full-term baby?
We don't know the full mechanisms, but it's probably because their gut is so much more immature than a full-term baby's gut. The digestive tract is line thin. It's not yet ready for a lot of feedings, and it's not ready to take on another animal's milk because the cells in the intestinal tract are widely spaced at that point. So the human milk can have direct access to other parts of the body, other tissues, the lungs, the kidney, the heart, and start putting protective factors in those places.
And so what I'm hearing you say that for our littlest of babies, sickest of babies, that human milk, for them to be able to start off life that way, is literally life-saving.
Absolutely. It's life-saving. It has long-term benefit. It's been documented that their hospital stay is 4 days shorter. They go home sooner. They're healthier. They're less likely to have not just the complication of NEC, but lifelong complications that go along with that. It's medicine for them. It's really medicine.
Yeah. So wonderful. You know, you had your own personal experience, but of course, along the way, you've learned all of the medical reasons why we really need to give our babies human milk.
Yes, it's just necessary for their survival and for their long-term health.
So now after this one neonatologist turned your world upside down in like less than a 24-hour period, what did you do from that point on to get a milk bank to come to fruition?
Well, I had continued on to graduate school and became a nurse practitioner. So that was 3 more years for that. And so then I was able to open up my own practice. What I did was I started my practice in 2007. And by 2009, I realized that I had a license, so I could actually have donor milk in my office. I called up the New York State Department of Health and said, I'm a licensed provider. Can I have donor milk in my office? And they said, you sure can. Yes, you have to fill out an application, but you can. So I did. I bought a little college freezer and I obtained 12 bottles from North Carolina. Delaware was no longer on the scene at that point. And I put 12 bottles, 3 ounces each, in my freezer. And then I started lecturing on going to lactation conferences and telling other lactation consultants that there was donor milk in New York if anyone needed it, talking about the benefits, etc. And these lactation consultants were going back to their neonatologists and telling them, there's donor milk in New York now, and we can get it, and it's not so difficult to do. And the Hudson Valley Breastfeeding will help you fill out the paperwork to get a license. And now the research was coming out, of course. By 2012, the research came out. So the first call came from Winthrop University, had a very sick baby. And Karen McIntyre was the lactation consultant. She had attended one of the presentations I gave in Long Island. And they called and said, how do we obtain donor milk? And they brought in donor milk for that baby. And they haven't turned back since. Usually once a hospital gets donor milk in and they see the results, they get more donor milk in for the rest of the babies. That's what ends up happening.
Now, I'm just curious, do you know if Winthrop University, once they accepted that, did Winthrop or any of the other hospitals that you have knowledge of, did they start doing their own studies or did they accept the research that had been out?
I don't know if they've done their own studies, to be honest with you, but I think they just accepted the research that was there. And then they started to see the results themselves with their own babies.
Excellent.
They were the first hospital, yeah.
So then what happened?
Well, then Vassar Brothers called. The actual neonatologist called me. First case, it was the lactation consultant, but he called and said he had a baby that had 2 episodes of necrotizing enterocolitis. And he said, donor milk is going to be the only chance of this baby's survival. How do we get it? And they didn't get milk from me, these 2 hospitals. I told them where to get it, how to obtain it, how to fill out so I facilitated how they could get it. Then NYU called and more hospitals started calling. So that started the ball rolling with getting milk into the hospitals. My little milk bank was getting milk out to outpatients and to private patients whose babies were in hospitals that didn't use donor milk. We had one mom of a baby at Westchester Medical Center, and they agreed if she paid for it herself and brought it in, they would let her use it. She was coming every week and buying lots of milk from me to bring into the hospital for her baby. And then Westchester Medical Center obtained a license and decided to start using donor milk for all their babies. Now they use it for all babies that are under 1,500 grams. So lots started changing during that time. And that's when I started thinking, we need our own milk bank. North Carolina at one point called me up and said, where's the milk we're sending you going? And I said, it's going to a baby in Westchester Medical Center. The mother's getting it here and bringing it in. And they said, well, we don't have enough milk to be providing to you and to continue to do this. We need it for ourselves. And I assured them it was going to a preterm infant. They wanted to make sure it wasn't going to a full-term infant. Mm-hmm. But they let their license lapse. And that made me really nervous because now Delaware was no longer doing it. North Carolina wasn't. Ohio came on board. And then 2 years later, as I mentioned, Massachusetts came on board. But I thought, we need a milk bank.
So you start getting involved with it because it sounds like, I mean, of course, I know that you wanted it, but now it's like a necessity.
I felt driven now that here we are, at the time, we were the 3rd largest state by population in the United States, behind California, Texas, and New York. And Texas had 2 milk banks. California had 1. Well, actually, California has several. They have 1 nonprofit, but they have another profitable one. So they have 2. Texas has 2. New York had none. And we have 235,000 births a year. It didn't make any sense that we should be relying on out-of-state milk banks to provide for us. and that mothers would have to donate their milk and send it to other states, have it processed and sent back here.
Right. That's a little bit of insanity, right?
Well, especially with this whole movement of, think globally, but act locally. Isn't that what it is?
Yeah.
I started thinking about, we need a team. Let's put together a team. And the first thing we needed was a medical director. So I started putting the word out that I was looking for a medical director, and Susan Verschalik, who's a pediatrician at Bellevue, she answered the call, said she would be interested. And then Boriana Parvez, who was a neonatologist at Westchester Medical Center, she's been using donor milk now at their hospital. She came on board. She was interested in helping me. And then Katie Kelter at Montefiore, a pediatrician, she contacted me and said, I want to help too. So we now had a good team of 4 women who could start to put together something. And the first thing we did was we went to Crouse Hospital in Syracuse, who had an in-hospital milk bank. And their neonatologist, since 85, he did this work in Duke. And then when he arrived in Syracuse, he brought a pasteurizer with him. And he would take leftover milk from mothers on the unit after he had a consent form and tested their blood, pasteurize it, and feed it to the babies of mothers who did not have enough milk.
What a guy.
He was way ahead of himself.
He was.
So we saw his operation, and we saw how he only needed 6 to 12 donors a year to feed all the babies on his unit because they take such small, minute amounts of milk. We learned a lot from watching what he had done in such a small space. We picked up another woman, Roseanne Motti, who's a friend of mine. We were all working as providers, so she was doing all the pieces behind the scene that we didn't have the time for. And we started just getting people to help us and not charge for their services. We got a free website and help for a free website and free marketing materials and designing our logo and our brand name. And people just started donating their services to us. And before you know it, it took 3 years, but we had a milk bank going in 3 years.
Wow. So you had these other professionals who really, they felt that calling themselves. They joined the team. They're doing the work volunteer just because they're so passionate about it. And it takes you 3 years. And so I know the milk bank just recently had an opening, right?
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about that. I mean, when you realized that that it was really going to happen, and then you get to a point where you're having this opening. So tell us about that a bit.
Well, there was so much work that was done behind the scenes first. We were part of Habana, and we had to fill out an application to apply to become a developing milk bank. And we're still considered a developing milk bank until we have our second inspection by one of their representatives. We've had the first one. So we're still on their list of developing milk banks for a couple more weeks until she comes out. There was so much involved in, we need a pasteurizer. We need a place. Where are we going to go? Where are we going to put our milk bank? Where is it going to be in terms of accessibility to Manhattan? Manhattan is a very large patient population. Doing all of that behind the scenes, we were lucky enough that one of our recipients, we started a Giving Tuesday. Do you know about Giving Tuesday?
I don't.
Giving Tuesday in New York is a day right after Thanksgiving where you give money to help a cause. And so we developed a Giving Tuesday campaign of trying to get our milk bank open and raised money that way. And we had 2 very generous donors give to us as well. So we had the funds now to open, but we needed a place to do it.
Yeah, I'm thinking like every time you get through one hurdle, it probably brings on 5 other questions and hurdles that you need to think about.
That was exactly it. If you go and look at the minutes at any one time of the meetings, we had weekly meetings at a diner. And going from what's the name? I mean, we changed our name. It was Mother's Milk Bank of New York, and we changed it to the New York Milk Bank. And then what colors are we? And what's our logo going to be like? And they know us now every Tuesday night. They would see us. Okay, how many tonight? Doing it from the ground up, you're picking everything from the phones, the computers, the monitors, the furniture, the sinks, the cabinets. Everything had to be handpicked. The pasteurizer we had, because we had a financial donor, and Boriana had already picked out the pasteurizer she wanted. She's our neonatologist. So once we had the money for that, we had the pasteurizer in my garage, and we had it there for months before we could start the milk bank, because that was the first piece we acquired.
So you're bonding with the pasteurizer in your garage, and at some point you have to let it go.
I was very happy to let this thing, it was in a crate, with bottles and caps and taking up a large part of our garage, but that's where it stayed for a few months until we moved it.
Then you need staff, right?
Exactly. We needed staff. What we were surprised with, we knew we were hiring Roseanne to be a manager. And then we also established depots. That was big. The Human Milk Banking Association of North America had recommended, why don't you get some depots going? And a depot is a milk collection site. That is a place where a mother who's been approved as a donor can conveniently drop off her milk. So we arranged to open up depots with the Ohio Health Mother's Milk Bank, that it would be our depot, but we would collect the milk since we weren't open yet. For them, they would screen the donors, we would collect the milk and ship it to them. So we were able to, by the time we opened, we had 17 depots throughout New York State.
Wow, that's an accomplishment in of itself.
It was amazing, because what we had no idea was the women really wanted their milk to stay in New York. We were getting calls from women saying, I don't want my milk going out of state. We were telling them, well, it's going to Ohio right now, just until we open. Once we open, we're going to keep it in New York. And so by the time we opened, by April, we had enough room to start holding on to the donors now, not giving them to Ohio, which they agreed with. We had an agreement with them. We started to collect the milk and keep it in freezers and wait until we had our actual site. And then the way we found our current location was one of our recipients, Teresa McCaffrey, she gave birth to a 24-week-old infant and who was at Westchester Medical Center. Actually, the baby was born at another hospital. They did not have donor milk at that hospital, wouldn't allow her to bring in donor milk. She moved the baby to Westchester Medical Center so that she could give her baby donor milk. Westchester didn't have a license for it at the time, so she was purchasing the milk herself and bringing it into her baby, who is a thriving 2-year-old now. She knew about the Giving Tuesday campaign and actually gave us a donation, and I had to personally thank her because she was one of our recipients. And when I called to thank her, she said, I'm at a nursing home. I have a nursery school there, and they have space. And we were looking for some sort of other nonprofit organization that we could team up with rather than having a storefront in a strip mall. I contacted their director, Betsy Biddle, and it was a great match. They had this small space for us. It wasn't much. It was 850 square feet, but we thought we could start there. And we agreed to start there. We were able to move our pasteurizer over, buy freezers, dishwashers, refrigerators, counters, sinks, computers, desks, and get the whole thing going.
I don't really know why, but it's just that sitting with me so well to think about a nursing home with an elderly population having the milk bank there for a very young, delicate population in the same place.
I think that's how both Betsy and myself felt, that she had the nursing home was started by John Andrus, who was a philanthropist and wanted to provide rest for the elderly. There is something in his mission statement that addresses the youth as well. But Teresa had the preschoolers and Betsy has the older adults, and we have the preemies. It's everywhere there now. It's intergenerational, and that has a wonderful feeling to it, that we're in a real community.
Yeah, it sure is.
We're not isolated and alone. We're part of this fabulous community that is right outside Yonkers, which is right outside Manhattan.
Wow. And I just love the way it evolved.
It did. It almost felt as if, in a way, I was sort of a conduit for some sort of cosmic force that was going on. That's how it felt to me. I was just a conduit. Ideas were coming from me when I meditate, and they were coming in through meditation. And I was stuck in traffic one time with my husband and thinking, what if we're delivering milk to New York and we're stuck in traffic? And, then there's a motorcyclist that's bobbing and weaving through traffic. And I thought, wouldn't that be a great idea to have a motorcyclist delivering milk in and out of Manhattan.
I remember hearing stories a while ago, I think it was in Germany, that the postal office used to deliver donor milk from home to home, or paramedics or someone along that line used to deliver it. Did you ever hear those stories?
I haven't heard of it in Germany, but in Brazil, they do have, I think the postmen are delivering pumps on their motorbikes. And I heard of blood in London being delivered on motorbike. So
why not milk?
Exactly. So I did a Google search and thought of, let me find a woman's motorcycle club. And the Sirens Motorcycle Club of New York City, I don't know if you've seen anything that's been in the press or on our Facebook page. They held their fundraiser at our milk bank. They did a benefit ride for us. 13 female motorcyclists went up to New Paltz, picked up some of our milk from one of our depot, and had a caravan coming in, arriving at our milk bank to deliver it. And the New York press was there to record it and interview everyone. And we dubbed them the Milk Riders.
That is fabulous. The Milk Riders. Love it.
And we also have a male milk rider, Dominic Posilipo. He is also a volunteer milk rider for us and picks up milk at depots and delivers it when we need it. If we can't do it ourselves, we can call them up for some help.
What's his name? A nice, good New York name. Dominic, what did you say?
Posilipo.
You're cruising there.
As I said, it just all kinds of came together. So it just means that the time was right. It really was right. New York was ready for it. The pieces were in place. It was a matter of putting it together and making it happen. And that's what ended up happening. It started to take on a momentum of its own.
Have you heard that Phoenix, Arizona is blessed with an amazing birthing center? Baby Moon Inn Birth Center is the best option for families who want access to midwifery care in and out of a hospital setting. You can experience birth in a comfortable home-like setting where natural birth is the focus. Laboring in water, being able to walk outside during labor, and enjoy the beautiful garden. This is what birth can be like for you. There is so much more to learn about Baby Moon. The staff would love to have the opportunity to meet you and would like to extend an invitation for you to attend a free Choices in Childbirth class and a tour of the birth center. All you need to do is call 602-314-7755. That's 602-314-7755 and ask for the tour dates. You can also go to allaboutbreastfeeding.biz/podcast. And on the right-hand side of the page, you will see a link that will bring you to the calendar, and you can sign up for the tour yourself. When you come in for the tour, make sure that you tell them you found out about it from the All About Breastfeeding podcast, and you will be given a very lovely free gift. Now, back to the show. So for my listeners who still really aren't totally familiar with milk banks, sometimes I forget that people might not be able to make that connection and that transition. So now you're getting this milk in the milk bank. And now how does the public have access to it? What is that process like?
We should also talk about screening of donors and how we accept them. We're trying to make that easier for people. Because in New York, milk is licensed as a tissue, you need a prescription for it. So they have to first get a prescription from their pediatrician. There's outpatients, and those are patients that are not in the hospital. And then there's inpatients. If they're inpatients, now the hospitals are all beginning to carry it. We have over, I think, 25 hospitals in New York State already providing donor milk to infants in the hospital. It goes to preterm infants, and some hospitals are using it as a bridge until the mother's own milk comes in, which means it's also going to some term infants, full-term babies, because if a mom's milk is delayed and they have to feed the baby, instead of feeding the baby formula, which introduces the baby, even a term infant, it increases the risk of infection and it introduces an allergen. So the rate of allergies increase. If we give the baby donor milk and the baby only needs a day or two of donor milk to carry them over until the mom's milk is in, we can help lower the risk of infections and allergies for term infants. And then there's the public at large, adopted babies. babies who are survivors of NEC maybe, and still the mother doesn't have enough milk and the mother's home caring for these infants who maybe have an ileostomy bag. We have a case like that just happened. Baby was born at 24 weeks and spent 5 months in the hospital, did develop NEC, but they think she survived because she was on donor milk. And the mother is home now, and the stress of caring for her infant is taking its toll on her. She can't pump what she was pumping. We were able to negotiate with her insurance company to cover the milk for that baby. Now, each case has to be evaluated individually, but this is a huge game changer for mothers if we can start to provide milk and have insurance reimbursement for it.
Right. And I don't know if you want to talk about that yet, the cost of the milk for private families and or to the hospitals.
The market price of donor milk is $4.50 an ounce. It's cost effective in hospitals because of the reduced hospital stay and because of the healthier outcomes. But that's pretty steep price for parents at home.
Right.
And it's leaving out a section of the population who can't afford to pay for it themselves.
Yeah, because just again, so my listeners, they can make that connection. So if it is $4.50 an ounce, and if we're talking about a preterm baby, that's a very, very small amount. But if we're talking about a full-term baby that might need this milk, who may be taking 20, 25 ounces a day, that's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money. And so we are beginning to go after insurance companies to provide milk. And I don't know if you know about the quote-unquote Nicholas bill. We've coined it that name. It's Medicaid reimbursement in New York State. The bill was passed by the Senate and the Assembly, and it's on the governor's desk now to sign. It's effective January 1st, and it covers 3 categories. All premature infants under 1,500 grams, both inpatient and outpatient. Babies that are really sick. Babies that have certain illnesses that are sick. And the 3rd category is a little gray. It says any baby in need. So all babies are in need. I lecture sometimes at Columbia. They have me teach a guest lecture there every year, and the students will turn around and ask, not everybody can breastfeed. And they're right. Not everyone can breastfeed, but every baby deserves donor milk if the mom can't breastfeed or won't. It might not be for everyone, but the babies deserve the best. And so we've got to make sure that they get the best. There's actually a new bill coming up. We won't even go there because one step at a time. There's a new bill going that we're going to lobby for 3 months and under to cover donor milk for all infants, but we're not there yet. We're working on this bill, getting this implemented. I think because this bill is imminently going to be effective in January, I think that was the catalyst for getting this one insurance company to pay for this baby who was an outpatient. If this bill hadn't been even close to coming into fruition, I don't think that outpatient who had the baby that survived NEC, that insurance company is covering donor milk for 8 months for that baby.
Wow, that's fabulous. And one of the reasons I asked about were any of the hospitals doing their own studies or research, because all of that will help to support the bills that you're looking to get passed, taking in baby steps, but all babies under 3 months old. So the more research we have about the health of babies and the decreased hospital stay, the decreased expenses, the increase in health for the babies, all those will help to support the work that you're trying to do with the insurance companies.
That's right. And I think we've made inroads with premature infants. And now I think we have to extend that to term infants if the mother's as a bridge. And then what about foster babies?
People who don't really understand it, even though they've come to a certain point, maybe now they can understand sick babies, premature babies. But that's what's in their heads now. And I've spoken to a lot of people about this. Now, if they don't really fully understand it, they now have to make the leap from sick babies, premature babies, to why a full-term healthy baby is deserving of this milk.
Exactly. Adopted babies, all babies.
All babies.
Human milk is meant for human infant. It's not meant for anyone else. It's so species specific, and we owe it to our littlest, most vulnerable citizens to give them the very best, and it's human milk. And in Brazil, the mother doesn't have enough milk. She just walks out the door with a couple bottles of donor milk, and she just can go and get it anytime she needs it. We need to do that as well. However we can help these people get it without incurring the cost of paying for it themselves.
Yeah, it's a whole change in mindset. What I wanted you to also address was the donors and how you go about finding donors, and also would like people to, if you can kind of share with us some of the donors that you know of, if you know of any personally, why it is they're spending time pumping and giving their milk.
Well, donors tend to be women who are copious milk producers. For one reason or another, they're pumping, whether they're trying to manage this huge milk supply, or their baby was in the hospital and they had to pump, or they are working mothers and they're pumping for their babies. It's not as if a woman calls and says, I want to donate milk, and we say there's a minimum donation of 150 ounces. And so she pulls out her pump and starts pumping 150 ounces. Our donors are calling up and saying, my freezer is full of milk. There's no room in there. And Thanksgiving is coming and I want to cook and there's no place. My husband says I've got to do something. And those are the calls we get. One woman in particular called as she was up in Buffalo. And so let me explain the screening process before I actually go into individual situations. So she says she's got a lot of milk and she wants to donate. So we begin a pre-screening, which is a 10 to 15 minute questionnaire of what's the age of your baby? Are you on any medications? Did you take any medications while you were pumping? Are you on any herbs? She can't be on any herbs to increase her milk supply, because why would she be increasing her milk supply and taking herbs? If she's a copious milk producer, she's a copious milk producer.
You don't want anybody, there might be an issue with the herbs in the milk, but you also don't want anybody forcing their body into doing something that it's not doing on its own, right?
Exactly. There are women that are just natural milk producers, and just like there are cows that they want to clone, there are women out there like that as well, that you just look at them and they start dripping milk.
I know. I'm like, you could feed 3 other kiddos on your block with your supply.
Well, that's what used to happen in the old days before milk banking. There was the woman in the village that anyone needed a little supplement. Mother would just stop by and have a little snack, nurse her baby for them. That's really what did happen. Not necessarily wet nursing, which is a whole different thing where a woman from one economic group is hiring a woman from a lower economic group to feed her baby. But we're talking about supplemental feedings. My friend Ida, her mother fed 5 babies snacks. They would stop by and ask for a meal for their child every now and then. They have to have this screening. Travel restrictions. Has she traveled or lived anywhere? So, we're a little mad cow disease over in Europe. There's some restrictions with that. Traveling to countries that might have the Zika virus, although we can pasteurize the milk to avoid that. After she's passed that 15-minute screening session, any tattoos recently? Was sterile technique used? What kind of diet do you follow? How much milk do you have? What kind of freezer is it in? Once she passes that, then we send her a 17-page questionnaire that's a lot more detailed about her whole lifestyle, whether she smokes, is she at risk for HIV? Does she have any activities that might put her or her husband at risk for infectious diseases? We need a letter from her doctor saying that she's healthy, and a letter from her pediatrician saying that the baby is healthy and thriving. And when we get that back and we realize she's passed that part, then we send her to a lab to have her blood drawn to test her blood for 5 infectious diseases. And it's HIV, hepatitis B, hepatitis C, HTLV 1 and 2, which is a rare virus, and syphilis. And then when her labs come back and they're negative, now we can accept her milk.
So it's a process in that a mom, it's just not good enough for her to be, she has all this milk to be excited. She really has to A lot of people don't like filling out paperwork. So she really has to be highly motivated to be able to want to do this.
She does. And on occasion, when a mother realizes what's involved, we've had a few people say, oh, I'm not going to do it. And then we've also had them call back and say, yes, I am. I'll do it. Yeah. They need to be committed to want to do it. And what we're finding is we had no idea what the response would be from New York women because they're donating the milk. They don't get paid for it. It's a donation and it's a minimum of 150. But one woman in Buffalo brought 4,000 ounces into one of our depots.
No way.
At one time.
I hope you have pictures of that.
Oh, we do. It's been on our Facebook, our page. I mean, it was boxes and coolers, and there wasn't enough room for it. They had to get freezers, and where are we going to put all this milk? And then when it arrived at our facility, we have to pull it out and put it by month groups. This is April, and because it has an expiration date on it of 1 year, whatever her earliest pump date was, it gets a 1 year expiration date. So just to figure out the monthly groups of her milk took, I think, shut down the place for many hours while they were trying to figure out. But if you did 10 ounces a day, that right there is 400 babies.
There's so much to think about all of this. And sometimes I haven't lost the human interest part of the story. And I know that you haven't. But there is some things about the human interest story to just think about. One mom donating 4,000 ounces. How many babies' lives did this one mother save?
It's mind-boggling when you think about it. She was our largest donor, but the average donation is 600 ounces.
I've met many donors, and women do it just because they just feel really good about being able to give back. And they often think of it as just one very, very, very small thing that they can do.
We also have bereaved donors who donate. Now their baby has shed their body, and they are donating milk to save the lives of other babies. And some of them will pump for a year. And it's therapeutic for them. We have one mom, she labels her milk Micah's milk on the outside of the box before she ships it to us. And she has said it's really helped her knowing that Micah did not die in vain. He's helping. His milk is helping hundreds of babies.
Mothers are pretty amazing, aren't they?
They really are. They really are. We're just in awe of them. Yeah.
So what's in the future for the milk bank? So now you're open. You had a grand opening?
Yes, we did. Yes.
What was that like?
It was wonderful. We had about 100 supporters, lots of press. I can't even see all the stories that came out of it. I've maybe seen one or two, but there's so many stories that came out of it. And we're continuing to have interest in it. How did you find out about the milk bank?
There was an article about Robert Cornegie, and he is from Bed-Stuy. And I don't know if you're familiar with this story, but sometime over the summer, he had gotten donations. His wife was a breastfeeding mom, and maybe through his wife and some other people, what happened was there's just like a lack of places in public for women to be out and breastfeeding their baby, and maybe in a private place, maybe a place where it's air conditioning. He opened up in his district a place, I believe it might even be in his office space, for women who were in the area to stop by and breastfeed their baby in comfort. And I think they may have opened up a couple of other locations in Bed-Stuy. So I saw that article and I was thinking about interviewing him, and somewhere along that, floating around cyberspace, I came across a story about the New York Milk Bank. And so that interested me. Here, I'm familiar with the one in Colorado, the one in Texas, Phoenix Children's Hospital here in Phoenix. They have a donor program. They've had it for quite a few years. And the IBCLCs they came every time there was like a new board and, the new incoming in the maternal unit. they tried again and they tried again. It sounds like your experience. Then one day someone said, I'm pretty sure that they were just expecting to be turned down flat again. And then one day someone said, do you have more information about that? Where's the research? And then boom, that was the beginning of it for them. I mean, I have a huge interest in the milk banks because for all the reasons we just talked about, all babies deserve the right to human milk, and not all mothers want to breastfeed. Not all babies can breastfeed. Not all moms can breastfeed, but our human babies, I always hate that term. It's the best milk, etc. It's just that our babies were meant to have our milk. It's meant for their whole digestive tract, their whole system, their respiratory system. It's for brain growth, for everything that we know. It's just milk that's supposed to be meant for them. And to have women who are willing to donate their milk and not have that in between the milk bank to be able to facilitate all that is just a crying shame for every area that's without it. So when I saw it was in New York, I'm like, yeah, I mean, that's how these words spread. We need to spread the word about the milk banks. And if New York can do it, Julie in New York can do it, and she can get this whole team of people together, well, so can someone else. And I just want it to spread because I feel that every community should have its own milk bank.
Yeah, milk has to be, I think, accessible to every infant and affordable as well.
And affordable. Yeah. I mean, and so I know some people squawk about that, but it's right now, it's the best that you can do and get it going and keep working at it, keep pushing the insurance companies, and it will happen slowly but surely, maybe not as quickly as we'd like it, but you have to have people like you willing to do the work, for the most part on your own time, your own energy, in order to make something magical like the New York Milk Bank happen. And then for you to go lecture and your other people and the milk riders, and in different ways, the word will spread and motivate someone in this area, someone in Ohio, someone maybe back in Delaware to open up their milk bank. It just needs to come back to what it was in the early 1900s.
I agree. I think that we should look at Brazil. I really want to go over there and see what they're doing because they have, I believe, 230 milk banks. It's accessible everywhere. Their billboards talk about milk banking. They're looking for donors constantly. They help them. It's everyone knows about milk banking in Brazil, and we need that kind of a culture here. We finally are getting close to we're not a breastfeeding culture yet, but we're working on it.
We still got to get past the whole silly nursing in public stupidity stuff that drives us insane, right? Everything is kind of keeps rolling all in the same direction. And people like you and the team that you have should be celebrated for all the hard work and effort that you put into it. And my thing is that I say about some other things in life, it shouldn't be the best kept secret. So we need for the rest of the world to find out about it. So milk banks it's just a household word.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, just like the blood banks. I'm like, why can't it be? First of all, why did milk banks close so quickly with the AIDS epidemic? And why couldn't they make the milk safe rather than everybody freaking out and closing the banks?
That's a very good question.
Because it wasn't deemed important enough.
It wasn't. And there was another substitute. It wasn't a healthy substitute, but there was a substitute.
There wasn't a substitute for blood. So a greater, more widespread, broader population. So there was a lot of energy and need and value that people thought of it. And I mean, sometimes I ask the question why, but I kind of know the answer, and I'm pretty sure that's the answer. It just wasn't valued. Again, I celebrate you, Julie, and the rest of your team, and I can't wait for this podcast to go live because it will reach thousands of people. And anytime you want to lecture anywhere here in Arizona, you got a place to stay.
Thanks, Lori. And you definitely have to let me know if you're in New York.
I will. Let me see. Is there anything else that I haven't asked you that you wanted us to know about the work that you're doing?
No, because you covered the point about having donor milk available to all infants, which is one of our mission statements. A lot of milk banks talk about preterm infants, but we have selectively chosen to use the term all infants. And that's what we want to see done, not just these. We want the preemies to have it, of course. That's our number one goal, but we also want it for all infants in need. This is what the food that Mother Nature intended these babies to have. So let's give it to them.
Human babies, human milk, right?
Yes, exactly.
How might someone get in touch with you via email or the milk bank if anybody had a question for you?
The number for the milk bank is 212-956-MILK, which is also 6455. And my email is jbouchet, B as in boy, OUCHET @nymilkbank.org.
All right. I will be happy to put that in what I have the show notes that my listeners can go back to my website, look up this show, and they will find out all of that information. And if there's anything else that you wanted me to add to put in the show notes, you just get it to me.
Okay. We have a handout that covers a lot of the studies on the cost effectiveness of donor milk. Of course, it's been done with preterms, but now we have to do cost effectiveness with term infants.
Well, one thing at a time. I'll take the preterm and we could start with that. And when you get the rest, you'll send it to me. Julie, it has been a wonderful, wonderful pleasure. Thank you so much for taking your time to hang out with me and talk milk banks.
Thank you, Lori. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Mother's milk, truly a gift like no other. The Milk Bank provides pasteurized donor human milk by prescription or physician order to hospitals and outpatients throughout the United States. Premature and ill infants in the hospitals are the highest priority. I agree with Julie when she said, all babies are in need. Not every baby can breastfeed, and not every mother wants to breastfeed. But every baby deserves the best. Human milk is species specific, and we owe it to our littlest, most vulnerable citizens to give them the very best. I hope you enjoyed this interview, and I encourage you to share it with everyone you know who cares about babies, human milk, breastfeeding, and milk banks. There are links to the milk bank in the show notes. Until the next show, bye-bye.